Welcome back to World Traveler. This is Dennis Callan for the Hawaii Geographic Society. And in today's program, we're bringing you to a rather surprising part of a country that you might not recognize at first. There's bright, colorful flowers. There's pastel-colored buildings. We've got some arcades and loggias. Entering the Hotel dell'Angelo sounds like Italy. It says Ristorante there on the front. And it looks like Italy, but actually, we're in Switzerland. We're in the south part of Switzerland where they speak Italian. This is the region known as the Ticino, and we're visiting the town of Locarno. This is a very pretty little resort town along the shores of Lake Maggiore, and you can see the old town here has got an extensive arcade with lots of restaurants and ice cream shops, cafes, and little stores to poke around in. You can have some pizza, pasta. The food's Italian, they speak Italian, and yet, yes, we're in Switzerland. It's an interesting part of the world. It's a fascinating place where you could say they've got the best of both worlds. They've got the romance of Italy, and they have the efficiency of Switzerland. What a combination. There's the old churches with the Italian Baroque style of decor, the charming old-fashioned architecture of the old town, and you'll notice the streets here are very narrow. There's no cars allowed in this part of the old town. It's strictly for pedestrians, which always makes it lovely for a stroll, very safe for the families, nice and quiet and peaceful here. And there's a few little hotels that are sprinkled around in the old town, and of course some excellent restaurants. And a variety of shops and other sites. And here we are traveling along with our group from Hawaii, and one of the first things that we want to do upon arrival in Locarno is have lunch. And since it's the Italian part of Switzerland, well, we're going to have some Italian pasta. And just like in Italy, this is fresh pasta. Very delicious, very tasty. And too, you can have a variety of Swiss cuisines and international foods as well. Well, Locarno's old town goes for about 6 blocks by 4 blocks, so it's not really huge, but it's big enough to enjoy a nice stroll and have a poke around in the art galleries and look in some of the antique stores. This is a friendly place. They welcome you to come on in and browse around. Just don't knock anything over and break it. The stuff is so packed in here. It's like better than an art museum. A Baroque facade of a church, again reminding us of that Italian influence, as well as the arches and arcades and columns. Quite a few modern shop fronts along with the mix. The arcades are very convenient. When it's rainy or hot and sunny, you can duck under cover. As well with these narrow alleys, there's a nice, shady, cozy feeling in these alleys. Well, especially walking at twilight, as you see here. It's always a nice time to be out. Shops are just closing, restaurants are just opening, and it's cool and comfortable. Well, there you see a map of the extent of the old town. Only takes about 15-20 minutes if you were just going to walk from one end to the other. But you could easily spend a few hours just meandering and strolling, kind of an aimless wander, getting a little bit lost, but you'll quickly find yourself again in such a little place. This is Piazza Grande, the main square. And there are some smaller piazzas up on the side streets as well. You find yourself walking in circles here, but when you come to a spot from a different angle, it looks like a different street or a different restaurant. This outdoor place had some live entertainment. Nice atmosphere to just enjoy the party, sit outdoors, very pleasant temperature. We're traveling in the month of May. By now it's late May, and the temperatures are just perfect. They have a Mediterranean climate here in the Ticino in the south part of Switzerland. You'll even find palm trees growing. They don't get any significant winter weather here. It doesn't get real cold. They might have the occasional dusting of snow, but that would be pretty unusual. It's a very pleasant temperature. And they have a bit of a history in Locarno. Here's the old castle. And we're going to have a look inside this castle. You pay your admission and you go on inside and have a look around. It's really about the only ancient historic type museum that you'd care to look at in Locarno. And they do have a nice little display with some ceramics and glasswares, as we'll show you. They were doing some restoration of a painting here. There are some original frescoes on the walls of this castle. And they've brought together some artifacts from the surrounding region. You've got the old columns and capitals and some architectural details. They've done a very nice job of renovating the castle and installing some modern display cases with really excellent lighting. And there are some little signs that tell you and label the artifacts, tell you a little bit about the history. Some ancient Roman glass. You might be surprised that 2,000 years ago the Romans made some beautiful, delicate glassware. And even 3,000 years ago the Egyptians were making glassware. This castle has an old, primitive feeling to it. You can almost imagine back in the day, 500 years ago, when there were some elegant banquets in these rooms, and it even looks like there's a dungeon. There's some small rooms down in the basement. They might have locked somebody away. You wouldn't want to get stuck in here after hours. But it's a quiet and friendly place. There's the turreted tower and the crenellated walls all around it. It's just right on the edge of the old town of Locarno. And then right across from it, there's a highway underpass where they did some archaeological excavations. And they found some Roman artifacts on the site. And they have put up a little display showing what was found. They have some of the original Roman arches that they've uncovered and the Roman walls. It's very informative underneath a highway bypass. Back in the little narrow streets of the town again. The Church of St. Francis is the oldest church in town. The choir and the cupola date from the 14th century, and the nave dates from 1528. So here we have a mix of the Gothic style and the early Renaissance. And next to the church is a former 13th century Franciscan monastery. Now this church has got some Baroque side chapels and some very old fresco paintings that are barely visible on some of the walls. It's a nice, quiet, and cool sanctuary in the midst of this sleepy little town. It's quite unusual to see such an old and Italian-style church in Switzerland. When you're in the north of Switzerland, you just don't see this kind of architecture because it's the Italian influence. And they've also got some modern buildings in Locarno, of course. Here's part of their university, young people hanging around out front. Back to the Piazza Grande in the heart of the old town to our hotel, Hotel dell'Angelo, and up in the morning to a nice breakfast together with the group, usually starting about 7 a.m. The breakfast room opens. And we have a nice buffet breakfast here. And then we're off for some day's activities. There's a morning market right next to the Piazza Grande. So that's kind of interesting to have a look at foods they've got. And here's a fellow making some polenta. It's made from a cornflower. Hopping on the bus, we're going off on an adventure this morning. We're going to take a bus ride up into one of the nearby valleys. Now, this is one of the great things to do while you're in Locarno, is to head into the mountains, and you can take your pick of several different deep valleys that go way into the Alps. We're driving up into the valley called Vallemaggia and visiting the small village of Bignasco. And then going a little bit further, this was quite a day. It was a little cloudy, a little overcast, but we really had some nice views and we were able to walk around in a couple of these little stone villages. The buildings are made from stone, which is quarried nearby. They've got lots of good quality stone for building available in these valleys, so usually architects, local builders take advantage of local materials. In this case, it's stone. Wonderful view of Bignasco here. It's a very picturesque spot. It looks like it's popped right out of a postcard with that old stone arched bridge. Some of these stone villages were abandoned about 100 years ago when the region fell on economic hard times, and the residents, many of them, uprooted themselves and moved to California. And there they established a wine growing industry, and they started producing a wine that they called Italian Swiss Colony wine. Remember hearing about that? Italian Swiss Colony wine? Well, here's where the people originally came from. They're Swiss, but of Italian cultural ancestry in the sense that they speak Italian. And they formed a little colony in California. So a lot of these villages have got some empty homes, empty buildings, and yet the people who are living here today seem to be doing fine. They're in modern Switzerland after all, which has a very strong economy. There are some spectacular scenic highlights. There's waterfalls and there's a beautiful river that goes right through the middle of this valley. We'll be doing some walking on the way back. We're taking the bus in and then we're going to take some little strolls in a few more of these villages. Most of the buildings are occupied today and they're quite nicely maintained actually. They look so ancient, they kind of look like hobbit homes that have just grown up out of the earth. All of those natural stone building materials are very organic and functional and attractive. And you can stop for some refreshments at a couple of the villages as well. Here we took a little stroll, just walked for about a mile along the stream, and it was nice and level, very comfortable, through a pleasant forested valley. And then anytime you feel a little tired, you can just go back over to the road and catch the next bus coming by, which is what we did in a little while. It's a very well-marked trail. And then soon enough, we're back on the bus and back in town, back in Locarno. Well, another activity that you can enjoy in this little town on the lake is a boat ride. They also have a casino. You could do a little bit of gambling. Up in the morning, not too many things open at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. The bakery's opening up. There's a couple of coffee shops that are open. Of course, the stores are not open at that hour. They generally open up about 10 o'clock, like they do in most places in the Western world. But the boat traffic is happening already. So you can go down to the lake and take an early morning boat ride. It's Lake Maggiore, which is really a huge lake. It goes for many miles right down into Italy. But in this case, you can just take a short boat ride if you choose. That just takes about 15-20 minutes to go across this little inlet of the lake. So that's what we did. It was curious though, it was so early in the morning that there was nobody else on the boat. It was like an 8 a.m. departure, and it had to leave anyway because they had to go across to the other side to pick up some passengers, and there you'll see some people were getting on. But it's kind of like reverse rush hour. Nobody's leaving the village at 8 a.m. except a few oddball tourists. From the lake, you have a nice view looking back at Locarno. There you can see how the village is just surrounded by the mountains. The snow-capped peaks in the distance and the valleys beyond. And just a small town, population about 10 to 15,000 here. number of hotels along the waterfront and the residential homes up on the hill. Just crossing the lake over to the next village, and there we're going to pick up some local passengers. It's a mix of some students heading over to the university for their classes, some workers going into Locarno for the working day. Short stop and then we're on our way. We just stopped at the small town of Magadino, and it just takes 15 minutes to go from Locarno across to Magadino, and then 15 minutes to go back to Locarno. However, there are some much longer boat rides that you could take on Lake Maggiore. You could go for 3.5 hours if you wanted to head on down to Isola Bella. That's down in the Italian part of Lake Maggiore, near the town of Stresa. And that's quite a nice island that we've been to in other episodes of World Traveler. But now we're back in Locarno. We've had our fun. We've been to the valleys. We've walked the old town. And now we're going to take a little trip over to the nearby village of Ascona. Here too you can go by boat from Locarno, or you can just take the city bus. It only takes about 12 minutes on the city bus to head over here to Ascona. And you're going to see this is a pretty little village. This is another one of these picture postcards that have come to life. It's got the town church. It's got the waterfront promenade with shops. It's got the cafes, the sidewalk cafes, and it has quite a few streets that are just for pedestrians in that typical European style that you find in a lot of the old towns, and some real high quality restaurants. There's a half a dozen really excellent restaurants here, and they've got an open street market. They have some loggias, some arcades, and it's just a little resort town with these pastel colored buildings, and it's one of the nice things to do in the Locarno area. Doesn't take long to get over here. Even on a rainy day, you see the streets are a little wet. There was a little sprinkle, and then it cleared up. The weather can change pretty quickly here when you're near the mountains. We are right next to the Alps after all, and still right on the shores of Lake Maggiore. Like Locarno, this town has an Italian feeling to it, even though we're still in Switzerland. The people here all speak Italian. Most of the locals, especially the older locals, don't speak any Swiss German. They don't speak any French. It's just Italian. They might speak a little English, especially people who are working in the shops and in the restaurants. They're going to speak some German and English, and of course Italian, maybe a little French. Most Europeans who work in the travel industry are multilingual, and so you don't have any problem getting taken care of in the shops and in the restaurants. Even in a little out-of-the-way village like this. Ristorante Cara. This was a nice place. Very nice setting. You can eat outdoors, indoors. It's a high-quality restaurant. Real gourmet food here with some friendly and efficient service. The chef's out on the floor at one of his ovens doing a little bit of cooking in the open, scurrying about. And here's some fillet of rabbit. That was delicious.